In Japan, there's hardly a more well-known face than that of Kitano Takeshi. Man of 1,000 comedy shows, political roundtable programs, theatrical films, and more. And historically, there's nary a more prominent figure from the samurai era than Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the farmer turned warlord who unified civil war-torn Japan in the 1590s, bringing together Takeshi's directorial flair and love of violence, wry comedy, and the story of Toyotomi's blood-soaked rise to power, and you get Kubi, a 2-hour-plus samurai epic that doesn't seem to care whether you take it seriously or not. Kubi is the first Takeshi film in 6 years, following on from 2017's Outrage Coda. Its genesis, however, came 30 years earlier, when Takeshi was working on the acclaimed Okinawa set crime film Sonatine. It was near the beginning of the Kitano Takeshi cinematic boom, where the director's idiosyncratically violent and funny cops and mafioso films were turning heads overseas. That Kubi took so long to develop makes sense. It's a markedly large-scale undertaking for the director with a budget of 1.5 billion yen. That's about $10 million even with the yen currently in an extremely weak state. Most major Japanese films cost between $1 and $5 million. Comparatively, last month's Godzilla Minus One cost about $15 million, which is a pretty hefty budget for a Japanese film. For Kubi, the budget gets us numerous action set pieces, lavish costuming, and consistent streams of CGI blood. All of this goes into portraying a bitingly cynical version of the Azuchi Momoyama period, which was 1568 to 1600, when powerful warlord Oda Nobunaga seemed poised to conquer the whole of Japan and end more than a century of multipolar civil war. Kitano stars as Hashiba Hideyoshi, later to be known as Toyotomi Hideyoshi, one of Oda's most trusted generals. But trust is a relative term in this film. Backstabbings abound, both metaphorical and literal. Kitano's films have always mixed a deadpan cynicism with a certain humanistic warmth. Sudden, graphic violence is often juxtaposed with scenes of calm and muted silence. Now, Kubi is definitely more cynical than it is warm, but the few tender scenes that we get are actually quite interesting. That's because Takeshi has decided to portray a side of the samurai that most films ignore. That being that samurai society was one in which homoeroticism was par for the course. Hello everyone, Tasha de gozaru. Welcome back to Unseen Japan. As always, Sessha wa no asuka de gozaru. Apologies for the samurai lingo, but this movie sorta got me in the feudal mood. This was one I'd been looking forward to as a fan of Kitano Takeshi's movies, so I'm happy to be able to bring you this early review as the movie is first released here in Japan. It's been a busy movie season, and I intend to keep on bringing you earlier reviews of major Japanese releases, as well as historical and linguistic video essays. If you like what you see here, give us a like and subscribe for more, or maybe even some support over at Patreon. Alright, back to the review of Kubi. In fact, the crux of the film lies upon one of many male-male romantic or sexual relationships. Kubi is set in the lead-up to one of the most impactful and mysterious events in Japan's Warring States period, Nobunaga's sudden betrayal by vassal Akechi Mitsuhide, who forced the lord to commit seppuku. Known as the Honno-ji incident, Akechi's motive for the shocking betrayal, which came as Nobunaga was at the height of his power, remains unknown. Now, Kubi posits that Akechi, played by Drive My Car's Nishijima Hidetoshi, was in love with another betrayer of Nobunaga, Araki Murashige. The scenes between Akechi and Araki are the closest the film comes to warm human interaction. Even here though, power imbalances and implicit threats loom over all. But Takeshi goes even farther in showing what 17th century author Ihara Saikaku once called the Great Mirror of Male Love. Samurai armies attracted camp followers, including male prostitutes dressed as female courtesans, historically highly popular with samurai patrons. Many of Oda Nobunaga's generals seem to have love triangles going on amongst themselves, and Nobunaga himself, gleefully played by Kaseryo as a deranged sadist with the Yakuza's drawl, keeps more than one male lover on hand. Within this telling, this actually includes the historical African samurai Yasuke, played here by Soejima Jun, a biracial Japanese actor. What's interesting here is that this actually isn't Kitano's first foray into queer samurai filmmaking. In 1999, he starred in Oshima Nagisa's Gohato, in which he played Hijikata Toshizo, leader of the Shinsengumi, a famed group of late Tokugawa-era shogunal bodyguards. In the film, he's one of many Shinsengumi members transfixed by the beauty of their newest recruit, young Kano Sozaburo. Now let's talk about three of the primary characters within this tale. Historically, Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu were known as the three great unifiers of Japan. Each can easily be counted among Japan's most famous historical figures. Each plays a major role in Kubi, where their historical reputations are both adhered to and exaggerated. Now there's a very famous saying regarding the attitudes of these three warlords, which fits their portrayal within the film. What is to be done if a bird won't sing? Kill it, says Nobunaga. Make it want to sing, says Hideyoshi. Wait, says Ieyasu. Now, Oda Nobunaga is known for his vicious campaigns to put down rival domains, including those belonging to warrior monks. His wiping out of the monasteries at Mount Hiei is especially infamous, as we covered in this video about the warrior monk Benkei, who was about 400 years earlier in terms of chronology than Oda Nobunaga. The version of Oda Nobunaga in Kubi, however, is more than simply brutal in his application of samurai-era realpolitik. He is a full-blown sadist, taking pleasure in abusing even his closest subordinates. I'll admit I find this portrayal to be a little bit overblown, but it certainly builds anticipation towards the fate that we all know is awaiting him at Honno-ji Temple. But the Yakuza-esque grandstanding allows for Takeshi's seeming message to emerge, that these great heroes of Japanese history were really nothing but violent thugs. Draped in exquisite finery and surrounded by European objets and Portuguese priests, Nobunaga is nonetheless just the strongest bully on the archipelago's playground. He interacts with his generals like a Yakuza boss does with his lieutenants. Each leads their own crew, letting words of loyalty hide their schemes for power. Takeshi expressed his rationale for creating this sort of grimy samurai film in a recent interview. Sorry for the really bad impression of Takeshi Kitano. When you think of samurai period pieces, you think of taiga dramas, which are a popular line of TV miniseries, but they're all just clean portrayals of success stories. Where's the dirty parts of humanity, their dirty deeds? I made this film around the idea if I were to make one of those, I'd do it like this. Now, both Hideyoshi and Ieyasu allow more chances for Takeshi to put his own personal spin on Japan's three most famous warlords. This movie, of course, Takeshi is both director and top billed, but really this is an ensemble piece. In fact, it's such an ensemble piece that those without Warring States guidebooks are likely to get lost in the stream of historical names that appear on screen. Nonetheless, he provides a memorable performance as a skilled manipulator, just one who also happens to be a bit of a buffoon. Takeshi allows Hideyoshi's commoner roots to shine through. He reminds us that he's not a born samurai, and thus is able to cut through some of the ritualistic barriers that samurai have set up to gussy up their bloodshed. But he's also a bit of a fish out of water. He's seemingly illiterate, and one of the more darkly funny scenes in the film comes when Takeshi, as Hideyoshi, is sitting by increasingly restlessly and impatiently as another samurai lord takes an exceedingly long time to enact ritualistic suicide. A samurai retainer played by Asano Tadanobu, attempting not to laugh, says, "My lord, a samurai's death is a serious thing." It's some nice black humor. Takeshi's Hideyoshi plays off rival Ieyasu, portrayed as the most genteel of the three lords by Kobayashi Kaoru. But Ieyasu is also a source of humor, constantly hiding himself amongst a series of kagemusha, that's body decoys. If you're looking to see the three great unifiers in action, Kubi offers up an enjoyable extreme take on each of their famed personality traits. These are some of the more enjoyable aspects of this movie. Now, as a whole, it's a bit overstuffed, I'm not gonna lie. This isn't surprising given the complexity of the topic that's being represented. Novelist Yoshikawa Eiji, famed for his writing of the Musashi novel, wrote an extremely popular serialization of Hideyoshi's life during Japan's war years, but he did so only with trepidation. How would it be possible to make an audience understand the vast array of shifting alliances and murky motivations of the Warring States period? Takeshi decides on a surprisingly maximalist version of this, and I have to assume that this is going to leave some viewers without a backing in history and Warring States period a little bit confused about exactly who is who and what is going on. This maximalism actually extends beyond just the samurai that are usually featured within these tales, and includes a semi-successful subplot about a commoner trying to rise through the ranks and gain some social mobility as a result of the war. We recently discussed two classic samurai-era set horror films that also include the story aspect relatively substantially, namely Ugetsu and Kuroneko, so check out that video if that topic is interesting to you. Both of those movies do a better job, but I also appreciate Takeshi including this additional social aspect within the film. It really makes it a much more rounded portrayal of this Warring States era, even if it's not one we're supposed to take incredibly seriously. Either way, though, I would say this is probably a movie you are going to want to watch if you like samurai films, if you like epic medieval war films, and if you already like Takeshi's personal style. I think people who don't really like those sorts of films aren't going to find a lot to really entice them here. And you'll also need a stomach for on-screen violence. Now, I'll add that this film is indeed full of plenty of on-screen death, and plenty of decapitations, and, bodiless heads, which of course is what the title Kubi, which means neck, comes from here. But this isn't quite the grotesquerie that earlier reviews led me to believe it might be. Amongst those severed heads, there's also scenes of quietude. This movie has not completely done away with that sort of meditative quality that a lot of Takeshi's best films have. Between samurai battles, leaping ninjas, and deadpan black humor, there is a lot to recommend here. It's been said that back in the 90s, when Kitano was first considering his Hideyoshi story, Kurosawa Akira himself expressed anticipation. If Takeshi-kun were to film it, I imagine we'd have a masterpiece on our hands to rival Seven Samurai. Now, does Kubi reach those incredible heights? No. But I'd say this film isn't really trying to be on that level necessarily. For what it is, Kubi is a fun, blood-soaked time with both an interesting look at the three unifiers as well as some aspects of samurai society that we don't often get to see on film. If you like samurai and dark comedy, it's certainly worth checking out. Okay everyone, katajikenai for watching this review. I had a pretty good time with this movie. I'll admit to being partial to Takeshi's 1990s output, and I love his collaborations with Hisaishi Joe, the composer, with whom he shared a similar relationship as that between Miyazaki and Hisaishi. Sanatin, Hanabi, and Kikujiro are among my favorite Japanese films. Kubi isn't quite on that level for me, but I'll say that I was pleasantly surprised. It actually had me laughing out loud once or twice, which is surprising given the dark subject matter. Takeshi is a pretty funny guy, which is like, duh. I have another major release that I'll be reviewing in a few weeks, but my goal is to get another historical video essay out before then. Everyone, thanks as always for tuning in, and I'll be seeing you next time. Mata ne. Kitano's films have always mixed a deadpan cynicism with a certain humanistic warmth. Warmth? What?
I am Worf, son of Moog.